I grew up on my own, took care of myself my whole life, so for me, I just know what to do, how to survive.
That is Janine Desjardins. She's been living in an encampment on the banks of the Assiniboine River in Winnipeg for months now. She says the other people who call the tent city home have become her support system. But that community may soon be forced to move with new city rules. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba. It's a podcast. It's also a place where homelessness is on the rise, especially in cities like Brandon and Winnipeg, where the most recent street census found roughly 2,500 people are living unsheltered. That was from last year. That's meant more encampments, something we haven't seen on this scale in my whole life living here. The city estimates as of August there were about 100 encampments all across Winnipeg, with as many as 700 people. Now, next week, a new bylaw goes into effect in the city of Winnipeg that's going to restrict where people can set up their tents. CBC's Cameron MacLean spoke to people living in the camps. He also spoke to nearby neighbours and city officials to find out what these new rules are going to mean.
Starting November 17th, encampments will no longer be allowed within 50 meters of places like playgrounds, spray pads, swimming pools, or daycares, or 30 meters from transit stops, bridges, or docks. And when council passed a motion calling for this back in September, we mapped out where those restrictions would be, focusing on the downtown, and that's where most of the restrictions are. And if you look on the map, you can see that it essentially blankets much of the downtown, including riverbanks, parks, where we've seen lots of tents pop up in recent years.
It does look like some places like parks along riverbanks as well, if I'm looking at this maps, where we see most homeless encampments, are pretty much all now along the riverbanks no-go zones. What did you hear from people who are living specifically in those encampments then?
Yeah, well, our digital video producer, Victoria Tashnik, who worked on this project with me, she visited one of the camps along the river behind the Granite Curling Club in Mawston Park. This camp is in kind of an interesting spot because it's near a daycare and the curling club, but possibly not close enough, depending on how the city measures the distances. Victoria spoke to a woman named Janine Desjardins. She feels they're not hurting anyone and says she has nowhere else to go.
I'm not moving. What for? I don't know. I'm not doing nothing to no one. I don't know what the problem is. It's not like they're out here every day, all day long.
Janine says she's been trying to get housing, but she rarely hears back. And if she's told to leave, she says she'll likely just move farther down the riverbank.
What about other people who live in the camp?
Well, we also heard from a guy named Lucien Barron. He's another resident, and he actually supports keeping camps away from playgrounds. He says he has an 8-year-old daughter.
I'm glad they're enforcing it. Like I wouldn't bring my daughter down here, not a chance. And when they did the splash pad on Ross, I mean, the Bear Clan went and picked up over 50,000 needles in a span of 3 days before they started construction. That's disgusting. I couldn't even imagine if they swept this place, how many there would be.
So can you just elaborate sort of on the distances I just mentioned? Because you said the camp may be at risk of being shut down. So walk us through what you meant by that.
Mm-hmm. So the camp is, as I mentioned, is near the Granite Curling Club, which could be considered a recreation facility under the new rules. They say no camps are allowed within 50 meters, but is that from the building itself or from the property line? That could make a big difference for the people living in the camp. And it also kind of shows how the city has left some vagueness in these rules, maybe intentionally. It gives them options of how heavy-handed they want to be when they're enforcing it.
You also spoke to people who live near the encampments then, so what did they say?
Yeah, in the apartment building next to that same park, residents say they've dealt with thefts and safety concerns. I spoke to one guy named Billy J. He showed us the back fence where people have cut through and into the parking lot. He's had several bikes stolen, and once somebody lit a fire in front of his apartment door. That was just earlier this summer. He says he wants to feel empathy for the people living outside, but he feels like his rights are being infringed on.
I can show you downstairs in the garage where they've broken through the fencing, come in, stole things off cars, just caused bedlam, or you'll be sleeping in the lobby. Okay, I don't want to be all NIMBY about it. Not in my backyard, but I'm paying. I want to feel for these people, but not at the expense of you're robbing me.
Billy also told us he supports the city's new rules, but he doubts they'll make much of a difference. He doubts they'll be enforced, really, and that the weather, not City Hall, will actually drive people away.
Did the city explain how the rules will actually be enforced? I've asked that question and I haven't had a lot of clarity.
Yeah, I asked Mayor Scott Gillingham, and he says the approach will start with conversation. Officers and outreach teams will be asking people to move and trying to connect them with housing or shelter.
To say to those who are living in a tent, for example, in a park, to say you can't be there. Let's get you the help you need. Let's get you into either a shelter or into, connected with housing. That's the goal. I think, the hard enforcement, I think will be very few and far between.
There's still a lot of uncertainty about how these rules will be enforced and what the enforcement will look like. Greg McPherson, the acting director of community development, he wrote the policy and he says they're figuring it out as they go. McPherson says the document guiding their conduct is a living document. That's what he called it. And it'll be amended as they move forward and learn.
So City Council actually voted unanimously to approve the plan, but not everyone is convinced. Sherry Rowlands is the city councillor for Fort Rouge, East Fort Garry. That's the ward, you might know, that is home to the Granite Curling Club and the Riverbank encampment that we've been talking about here. She did vote in favor of the motion, but Cameron says she has some concerns.
She supported earlier outreach programs, but she's worried these new rules will simply push people from one place to another without fixing anything.
For me as the local counselor, you can see that migration and the emails, whether they're along the Assiniboine or they've now moved behind every single business in Osborne Village and in a little parklet, more proximate in the densest neighborhood that we've got, Osborne Village. It is no different. It isn't taking anything away. It's certainly not housing people. It's just making very vulnerable people have to work all day to get the same belongings, that sleeping bag or what have you, and move it somewhere else. Another one of Rollins' concerns is the lack of resources being committed to this plan. They're starting with only 2 bylaw officers and 1 coordinator.
So what happens from here?
So the rules officially take effect November 17th, although the city admits it will take some time to figure out what enforcement really looks like. They'll report back to council next year and to say how it went and what needs to change. I want to go back to Janine Desjardins, the camp resident that we heard from earlier. She has a message for people who think that she and other people in the camp don't belong where they are.
But they should just think about it. Instead of being so fucking self-centered and just because they have everything, a lot of people don't have the funds to get out of here. It's sickening.
Cameron, thank you.
Thank you very much.
While some people living in the shelters like Janine have found community, they're very much a last resort. Residents face harassment. They face violence. They don't have access to basic services, things like clean water or heat. Some have even suffered injury from things like extreme weather, from fire, and yes, from overdose. Other people have died. For those who live nearby, the encampments, though, have sparked fears about the safety and reports of theft and violence all around these spaces and shelters. So are these rules the solution? My colleague Jim Agapito went out in Osborne Village and he spoke to residents there. He asked them what they think of the restrictions.
My name is Serena Greasley.
Do you support the city's new rules?
I don't really. I understand kind of where they're coming from, but at the same time, homelessness is a major issue right now. There's not a lot of places for people to go, and I think before you put restrictions in place for encampments, you really need to have an alternative option available for people.
Robert.
And your last name?
Chase. Yeah, I do. And why? It's because people leave dirty needles and stuff around, for little kids to pick up and play with. You know, it's not healthy.
Sarah.
We need your last name.
Look, I'm kind of on both sides. Like, as long as they're not, like, especially in this one, they can go down by the river. No kids are involved, and nobody sees them, nobody's bothered by them. So I don't see why they would stop that.
Where would you like to see some of those people go?
I think we need more shelters in place. Definitely also shelters that are not necessarily, like full clean shelters, because people who necessarily do have addiction problems, they need a place to go as well. You need shelters of various kinds in various places, and those need to be in place prior to encampments being torn down.
Well, they need to have more housing in the city that is affordable for starters. Instead of all these condominiums they're putting up that's to me, it's just not right. There's a lot of us, like I'm a pensioner, we can't afford rent. We're put in housing, we're put in all this other stuff because we can't afford rent. And neither can these people that are in, and it's hard for them to get a place because they haven't had a place. It's really screwed up.
How strict do you think the city should be in enforcing these new bylaws?
I think they should be pretty strict, you know? They have to be, because you can't even walk around the city and stuff anymore like you used to, you know, without getting robbed, knifed, or anything, you know?
Personally, I would prefer if they're pretty lenient on it. You know, winter is coming, people need places to stay, and at the end of the day, in most cases, they're not harming anybody. They're just trying to find a place to live.
I don't think they should do them at all. I think they're stupid. They should work about other stuff, you know, finding places, putting the prices down on housing. Pretty soon there's going to be a lot more people on the street because we can't afford rent.
And what would you say to a homeless person who feels like the city is prioritizing the comfort of homeowners and renters over the safety and security of people who are homeless?
You know, people sort of bring it on themselves, you know. There's places to rent out there and stuff, but when people get into them, they make a mess, partying, drugging, you know.
And since you're a resident of this area, you know, have you seen this firsthand and whatnot?
Oh yeah. They used to hang in the park here and down over the bank and camping, and, you know, it's just make a dirty mess, you know. If they would clean up after themselves and stuff like that, more garbage cans down there or whatever, like, you know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, you know. Like, I feel sorry for them, you know, but what can you do?
I'm not sure what I would say to them, because I definitely think that in many cases they're right. That is seeming, oh, I'm so sorry, that's my dog. That does seem like the city is doing that. And, you know, people without homes, they are equally citizens here, people as well. They need a place to stay. And just because, you know, everyone here has homes or whatever, it doesn't mean that necessarily we should be prioritized over people who don't. Those are vulnerable people who are struggling in and of themselves, and we shouldn't be making it harder for them.
It's true what they're saying, because I've been homeless. I was homeless when I was 50, I was homeless when I was 60. And a lot of this, when you're homeless, they just look at you in a different way. These people are just trying to survive, just like all of us. And I just don't think that they're doing enough. You know, the politics on this crop is so bad that there's so many steps you have to go through, and you get nowhere, because they want to keep you in a certain spot. They don't want to help you get above that. To get training, no, they stop you down there, and they try to keep you there.
Well, let's widen out here for a moment, because tackling homelessness is a huge issue. It is one that many cities and provinces have been trying to address as well, with mixed results. In 2023, Wab Kinew's NDP campaigned on a promise to end chronic homelessness. And by late last year, the Premier still had high hopes for the year ahead.
Well, 2025 for our government is going to be the year that you, as the average Manitoban, start to see big steps on homelessness. And what I can tell you about what we've been doing since the election, led by Bernadette Smith, the Minister of Housing, Addiction and Homelessness, is we've been building up the housing stock and the buildings that we need to move people from tents into housing, and then to get them the services of addictions and mental health and other things, so that they can actually stay in housing and not end up back in a tent in the future. So I think we're at a point now, we're in the first few months of 2025, those units are going to come online, and then we're going to be able to go out into the community and start housing people and adding the supports that they need to be more successful.
That's Kinew unveiling his Your Way Home homelessness strategy in January. The target was to work with the city to end chronic homelessness in Winnipeg by 2031. Now, part of the plan involves moving people out of tents and into housing. But nearly a year later, the province says its strategy has helped provide housing to 100 people from encampments. But remember some of the numbers for the beginning? It's hard to understand if that's enough. Some people like Shauna MacKinnon, a member of the Right to Housing Coalition, say it is definitely not enough. MacKinnon says that both the Premier and the Mayor of the City of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham, are feeling the weight of growing political pressure as they realize they've made promises that may be difficult to keep.
Make it more difficult for people to find places to sleep, but we don't have the housing. We don't have the supports. We all know that it's, you can't just, move somebody from an encampment into housing and not have a whole host of supports for them. People's situations are all different. People have different issues. And so that's not in place. And so, here we are with the situation that the most vulnerable folks, those themselves who are in encampments, are being, are going to suffer from this policy that's being pushed forward too quickly. Not only too quickly, it's just far too coercive. And that also is making it more challenging because people are going to be increasingly resistant when they see that they're being pushed out, and it's less of a plan that is aimed at supporting them to find housing, to create housing for people and to place them in the housing that works with them and make sure that they have the supports to make that a successful transition. It just feels like it's just more coercive, and the interest is really around getting people off the streets rather than really helping them, transition to and find housing that works for them.
Well, that is it for this week's episode of This is Manitoba, hosted by me, Marcy Marcusa. If this was the first time you've leaned in and listened to our podcast, how about doing me a favor? Open up the podcast app of your choice and follow us. You can do it now. I'll wait. I won't wait for too long, but another second doesn't take long. Tell a friend as well if you enjoyed today's coverage, and also if you're engaged in the future of our city and our province. And thanks for listening. We'll be back with a new episode about the news that's shaping Manitoba next week.